Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for participating in the first session of our now traditional social media as a research tool online webinar series. We will this year this season host two exciting panels, and this is the first panel. We have two presentations that we are very excited about. First, Olga and Francesca will present us their research on visibility and digital recruitment. Olga is a PhD candidate at Institute of Social Prevention and Resocialization at the University of Warsaw, and this is a joint research with Francesca, who will also present part of the research. Francesca is a PhD student at Graduate School for Social Research, Polish Academy of Sciences. So we have 15 minutes, and they will present for the next 15 minutes, and after that, we will do a brief Q&A session for 5 minutes, during which you can ask your questions. Please ask your questions through the chat, through the Q&A functionality. And then we will move to the second session of today. Okay, Olga, please go ahead, share your slide, and then floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. So let me start. I hope you can see it already. Yes, that's fine. Okay, Francesca, so also I will change the slides when you will jump in, just to let you know, because we didn't know at the beginning. Okay, so I will put myself the time. So good afternoon. As it was already said, my name is Olga Wanicka. And together with my colleague Francesca Rizaregala, I would like to state that first and foremost, we are migration scholars. So we are interested in the broader exploration of the complex social dynamics of mobility. In our case, it's the Filipino migration to Poland. But today we will focus mostly on the methodology we use for one of the study component. So we are studying Facebook as a primary tool that shaped the visibility of employment opportunities in so-called new immigrant destinations. And in our case, it will be the Poland for Filipinos. So I hope it will change now. Slide. Sorry. Okay, it's changing. Okay, I'm sorry. So going to our research idea, we follow the mobile ethnography. Nowadays it's called mobile ethnography. Before it was usually multi-stage ethnography. So we assume that ethnographers, scholars, sociologists, they should not only follow people and how they are moving in the material space, but also any other traces of their movement in the digital online space, different spaces. In our case, it will be the digital space. So in our studies, we use some categories. Francesca will discuss it in a moment, but these categories emerge from the broader project, the project we conducted together, and the project title is Poland's Inclusion to the Global Network of Job Placement, the case of overseas Filipino workers. So for example, from these categories we'll discuss later, they emerge from the interviews with overseas Filipino workers in Poland and in the Philippines regarding what they are seek in a job offer, as well as with employers and intermediaries recruiters regarding what kind of employees they are looking for during their recruitment process. So you can see the two testimonies here. The first is speaking about the popularity of Facebook among overseas Filipino workers regarding to look for a job. And the second one talks about the advantage of employing Filipinos from the private actors' perspective. So in our case, it was one of the Polish employer who said that he would love to employ Filipinos because they are very they are very active in promoting particular job place online. So additionally, we were inspired also by the physical announcement we observe on the streets. So for example, in Manila, where I had a short stay in February 2024, and also it was observed by Francesca every time she came back home. So we quickly realized that the primary recruitment landscape has shifted nowadays to the digital realm. We also observed the statistical data, the quantitative data, and the quantitative data also told us about some trends. And we realized that these trends are also very visible online. So one of that trend was, for example, the trends of issuing the working permits for Filipinos. You can observe on the slide. within few years, the number of Filipinos grow up rapidly. And also, we observe another interesting and, let's say, popular practice among overseas Filipino workers who are usually recruited outside of the Philippines, outside of Manila. So in the same way, outside of the formal Philippines supervision. And we look for the traces of that third country recruitment and building the community of Filipino migration on Facebook. So everything we did, so interviews, the analysis of statistical data, observation, they told us that the new informal but also formal recruitment practices landscape is happening online, not only in the physical spaces. So to just give you an overview, we also follow every Filipino activity in Poland, and we also ask people about the role of Facebook in their life. So going to the theoretical remarks for our digital content analysis, first, Chen et al. Define the new immigrant destinations we are studying when there is a lack of established regulatory structure. And then in that situation, the social media become the necessity, the digital necessity where intermediaries promote the particular country as attractive opportunity. In our case, it was Poland. Then, following Ayadin, we observed the digitalization of nowadays job placement, where recruitment moves into the virtual environments. We also draw on Triandafilidou, who view social media as a critical communicative space where migration narratives are produced. They are also contested, and they are allowing for negotiation of power through the strategic visibility. And that was very key for our research, since we were really interested in the information visibility. And from the migrant perspective, we're also interested, as I said, what they are looking for. We already know from the Guzman and Garcia paper that overseas Filipino workers in Poland rely on the weak ties, and the online peers and intermediaries are essential informational support. So finally, Russell and Wood identify how digital platforms provide evocative image that shape imaginaries of the new immigrant destinations and imaginaries of success for workers. So by combining this all perspective, this method, let's say theoretical approaches, we saw that Facebook, it's not just a platform, but a digital ecosystem that organized the reality of migration to Poland for Filipinos. And I'm giving the floor to Francesca.
Thank you, Olga. Against this backdrop, we build on the visibility regimes, which is actually a notion that is typically employed by geographers. This is the idea that social objects are also spatial, which makes this idea of social spatial basically the basic backbone of society. Nevertheless, these objects are more than just what they show to the eye. And the idea of visibility regimes is that we extend this notion to unpack what is visible, not only in physical spaces, such as in the recruitment agencies that Olga showed earlier, but also to virtual spaces, such as online FB groups, which are acting as a continuum and not separate from one another. To note, visibility also deals not just with aesthetics, but what are relations of perception, but also broader relations of power or politics. So this is an example to the right we have here of a Facebook post. Of course, everything is anonymized for the original publishers, but essentially this is what we analyze, and we don't just look at what we see, but also what lies behind it or what foregrounds what we see in each of these posts. Next slide, please. For our methodology, we use a lot of methodological precedent from other scholars, similar migration studies, scholars that are doing digital migration studies, noting that digital migration studies, especially digital ethnography, is actually very conducive to such research because it allows us to research on groups that are heavily dispersed and those that are also using social media very actively, in this case, Filipino migrants who are among the top users of Facebook worldwide. For this, we created a group topology matrix, and we kept track of different key features with regards to visibility and recruitment. Out of this, we specifically summarize it here. We have the 6 groups that we analyzed: the admin type, creation date, the member size, and also the notes and typology, which we will be expounding on later. Next slide, please. For the methodology in total, we gathered 111 posts speaking about employment, that is through both official and unofficial intermediaries, employers, and migrants. The analysis period lasted for 2 months, looking at these groups every single day. And out of the 43 groups that we were monitoring, we specifically wanted to focus on 6 Facebook public groups for ethical reasons, which we expound on later, and also for the reasons that these were the groups that were having the most engagement, very active posts, as well as least redundancy in posts, and also most relevant to the theme that we were tracing. What did we check? When we were checking for visibility, we were aware that frequency did not necessarily equate to visibility. And so instead of just checking for the frequency of information, we were also checking visibility in terms of other factors, such as in a qualitative sense. For instance, visibility in terms of engagement, visibility in terms of what the algorithm would prioritize, usually in terms of what was getting the most interactions or what Facebook would deem as most relevant in terms of the general behavior of each of the groups. And from that, we analyzed the different roles of the different actors here. 3 key themes came out. First was that the intermediaries role. Most of the posts were published by informal intermediaries, which is contrary to the official regulations on Philippine migrant labor laws, which requires usually registered, legitimate intermediaries to facilitate the employment of Filipinos overseas. So these informal intermediaries happened in 85 cases. Next was manufacturing domination, which was consistent with the data that was provided by the Migration Office of the Philippines overseas, in which factory and production work was most sought after by employers as well as by intermediaries for the employers. And lastly, they used the Filipino group, but also targeted other groups of migrants, such as Nepalese, Indian, Sri Lankan, etc., which was very interesting and only contributes to the case of the new immigrant destination or Poland as an NID. As we remember, one of the things that characterize NIDs or new immigrant destinations is diversity in migrant profiles and not just the numbers. Next slide, please. As for our ethical approach, we made sure that to choose public groups so that we assume that users were posting in large public-facing groups and consent to reception. We also made sure to follow methodological precedent as mentioned, including non-interference or non-interference and sheer observation related to the group discussions. We made sure to anonymize all information that could help identify any of the actors that we mentioned in our analysis. And lastly, aggregation and paraphrasing, also making sure that their quotes cannot be directly searched or traced after across multiple postings. Next slide, please. And so as for this is what the analysis or kind of a summary of our analysis would show us. There were different typologies and we focused on 3. First would be very visible but blurred, in this case, salary. They would usually make this very visible in the sense that almost every single post would mention some sort of salary or allude to salary in a certain way. These were also the posts that garnered the most attention from the migrants themselves or from the algorithms themselves. But they would blur them in specific ways, for instance, alluding to big salaries, but not really showing the number of work hours or giving the amount of salary after taxes, but not being specific with the heavy number of work hours. There was also certain examples in which exact salary was given and in addition to that bonuses, but it was not clear whether this was done per hour, by month, etc. Next would be medium visible, medium blurred, transportation. Transportation also came out not only in terms of when transportation was provided, but also in terms of when transportation was not provided. We assume that this was because the migrants in Poland, the Filipino migrants are in Poland, are not necessarily all concentrated in one place. And they would like to know whether relocation would be possible or would this be feasible for them, depending on where they are originally stationed. Sometimes the cost of transportation was also shown, but in comparison to blurred or very blurred, it would be medium blurred, just in the middle, just enough to get the migrants looking at the post, but not enough to provide all the information. And lastly, something that was rather invisible and very blurred was legal assistance. Barely mentioned in the post were legal assistance, and if they are mentioned in the post, they are implicit. And for those that do provide legal assistance, they will specify, for instance, that they provide contracts or they help in providing contracts, but the type of contracts and whether these abide by the golden standard are not specified at all. Next slide, please. And from all of this, from this 2 month ethnography and from our analysis, we have a couple of reflections on methodology. The first is when conducting this form of ethnography and digital analysis, risk management is extremely important. Volatility of the group's lifespan. As we had shown in the group topology matrix earlier, some of the groups actually disappeared, and it is unclear to us whether they were deleted by administrators or by Facebook themselves. But this is something researchers must account for when they conduct similar types of research. And that's why consistent checking and keeping a very organized set of tools in terms of gathering the data was very important. The next would be the possibility of bots. Of course, there is methodological precedent that allows us to minimize this. It was also a lot easier in the case of looking at the Filipinos because AI tools we found are not yet advanced enough to mimic humans and human type of natural language processing and speech in terms of the post. And so this was something that we also checked for, but just we were very careful to make sure that that bots were also accounted for. Second is the ethics, which relates to four very important key themes: self-determination of the individual participants, their privacy, anonymity, and consent. And that's why we had a non-interference policy and chose only the 6 public Facebook groups. And lastly, reflexivity and positionality. For information, I myself am a member of the Filipino community and a migrant, and Olga has been working very closely with the Filipino community even prior to her research. We draw from this idea of morality, where you mentioned reflexivity as care, especially when analyzing different migrant groups who are sometimes in precarious situations, especially in the context of migrant laborers in new immigrant destinations. We encourage researchers to have more reflexivity and always be careful and also relate this to their positionality as if they are to perform similar types of research using social media. Next slide, please. We thank you for your attention. If you would like more information on this project, we have a QR code to the website, and we are also hoping to publish a paper on this very soon. We welcome all and every feedback and questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga. Thank you very much, Francesca, for a very interesting presentation. So, dear participants, attendees, if you have any questions for Olga and Francesca, you can leave them using the Q&A functionality. We have a couple minutes to go through the questions you have before moving to the next presentation. I have one question that I would like to pose, one main question. So, in any kind of research using social media, one of the main issues is temporal validity, right? Which means that digital media, social media is changing very fast. So something that is the case today may not be the case tomorrow, right? Platforms are changing, people's user habits are changing, and so on. So, and we know that with respect to Facebook, it is a platform that is in decline in certain demographics, especially, right? Like less and less people, fewer and fewer people are using Facebook. So, do you think that your findings would still apply today? Do you think that Facebook groups are still the main medium for people looking for jobs, Filipino people looking for job in Poland, or same channels of recruitment, or other social media or alternative channels are also being increasingly more dominant? What is your view on this one?
Francesca, you want me to start and you jump?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much for that questions. And yeah, I would say that Facebook is really distinctive for Filipinos so far, even though before Facebook, I was more interested in YouTube. So I was, for example, studying more deeply Filipino vloggers and how they are in the same way, in the same moment, sharing their life with other people on YouTube. And then in the same moment, they are usually working for recruitment agencies and they are also doing recruitment just a bit. So I would say that YouTube was equally popular, but when we started our idea, let's say, we started with looking for the groups for Filipinos. And I remember that it was just the beginning when the Filipino community was growing, was establishing, emerging in Poland. And Francesca already found 50 groups dedicated to Filipinos in different part of Poland for different circumstances. And then I realized, okay, Facebook is kind of popular still. And the recruitment agencies, which I was following a bit more, they also start using Facebook to recruit people. So I don't know how it will be in 1 year or two, but so far I would say that it's still very popular. I have also a different project now where I'm checking some kind of information dedicated to Filipinos on Facebook, and it's very, very in detail still, and there are still many groups. So I would say so far it's very popular, but what do you think, Francesca?
I would also say the same in terms of popularity. I think the Philippines still ranks sixth in the world in terms of Facebook users. It's definitely the social media platform that's most common for use. For reference, also, since we have a significant percentage of our population that is based abroad, it is usually the medium that is used to maintain these transnational ties or just to communicate with loved ones from a distance. And so it is because of that, it's like a productive ground for recruiters to use. A very important thing to mention is because of the lack of a formal labor agreement between Poland and the Philippines, which is a cornerstone in Philippine approach to its diaspora, to its overseas working population. Um, Facebook still acts as this perfect space for recruiters to kind of allow migrants themselves to navigate potential opportunities. I'm not sure if that will change when a formal or labor pact would, if ever, happen, because I know negotiations are still going on between Poland and the Philippines. That could definitely impact it, but for as long as that is still in the works or there is no formalized labor pact, Facebook will continue to occupy a very central space, I think, in the digital recruitment and in the brokerage when it comes to migrants.
Um, Thank you very much, Francesca. Thank you. That's very good to know. Also, like it's relevancy from your research perspective. I think my own experience also is that while its use is in decline in certain demographic groups, broadly Facebook groups are still very active for many different users. Okay, we have one more question, and then we will move to the other presentation. In the meantime, if you have any questions, our attendees, you can leave it in the Q&A, and we will come back to them. And many thanks, Marian, for interpreting this. Okay, here is Ksenia's question. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. This question is about methodology. What were the criteria for selecting the specific number of posts among all the groups you followed? Were the posts published by agencies, individuals, or both?
So maybe I will just start, and Francesca also, please tell everything I forget to say. But it was actually very interesting when we started with digital ethnography, because we were thinking how we should study that. If we should, for example, took just the sample of posts and look what is there, or we should maybe do something different. So what we did, we start with Excel, like 40 or something like that categories of information we are looking every day in the published posts. And when we were checking, for example, we had one post and we are checking, is there information about the salary? Yes. What is the information? If there is information about something, and that also reflects the visibility. So we end up with this amount of posts we show on the slide, but we didn't know how many posts we'll collect. We only knew that that's supposed to be the post about the employment. So that was one of the criteria. So any other, like, we just open a new shop, maybe you would like to taste the ethnic cuisine, visit us. We didn't analyze that. But we had this group, and that was also the big problem when this one group disappeared after 3 weeks. That was very difficult moment, because we didn't know what to do, if we should look for the other one. But Ben was also telling us something. And the second part of the question, were the posts published by agencies, individuals, both? rather by individuals, but individuals paid or working for recruitment agencies. So it was very rare that the agency posted from official agency account. And it was also rare that individuals just post on the individuals. For example, I remember we only encountered one advertisement in Polish posted by Polish employer, but rest was absolutely like individuals, often Filipinos, but working or commissioned by agencies. Francesca, maybe you want to add something.
Yes, and also something to note when it comes to this, what we were trying to do was since there wasn't a lot of there's no standard number of posts that we needed to look at, what we did is try to achieve saturation by at one point we realized that there was no more new data that was showing up. Well, after 111 posts, we realized this is more than enough data, and after 2 months, the 2 month span, that there wasn't anything new. And so we stopped there. And also when we were limiting ourselves to the 6 groups, right? A part of it was because other groups were not public. You had to be accepted by an administrator, usually a member of the Filipino community that we knew in person. And because of the ethical and for ethical reasons, we wanted to not do that. But we also took into account these factors when we were doing this. I know that in doing digital migration studies, this is also what other scholars are currently doing, analyzing brokerage on other platforms, usually a more video-based platforms. But as far as Facebook goes, this is what we did.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olga. Thank you very much, Francesca. And thanks again for great presentation. So we will now move to Vanessa's presentation. In the meantime, if you have any questions for Olga and Francesca, you can still leave them at Q&A and we will come back to them. Okay, Vanessa, I'm now sharing your presentation. Looks okay, right?
Oh, that's not the first. Can you go back to the first slide? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you for sharing my slides for me. So I'm really excited and delighted to be here to give my presentation. This is a really exciting topic. It's something that I can go down rabbit holes on, forever. But I was thinking, perhaps this topic is not. Oh, sorry, can you go back to the previous one? Thank you. Just stick on that one for now. So I was thinking, about this topic, and perhaps it's not, very in-depth social media research as such, because I'm more looking at the people and their usage of the social media and the dynamics there. So I was questioning whether it actually fitted this remit, but nonetheless, it's a very important topic and perspective to bear in mind when looking at social media, I believe. So this is my topic for today, feminist activism on social media in relation to deaf people. So now we can move on to the next slide, please. So this is just a little bit about me, my positionality. Obviously, that's important. It gives me a lens through how I see the data and how I perceive the data. And it's something that's easily missed. So I'm a deaf signer. I grew up deaf and sign language user. I'm from Austria and I use Austrian Sign Language. I'm also a PhD student and researcher. I'm white as well. And I'm based in Vienna, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm doing my PhD at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh in Scotland. Next slide, please. Okay, so my research focus. So I've seen a lot of social media research really being focused on what's seen on social media itself. So for example, likes, comments, posts themselves, what people actually see on the social media platforms. And there's less sort of about the hidden aspects. So the decisions that people make, the emotional aspects, the experiences of social media users. So I wanted to look at that, and especially at how deaf people experience the decisions that they make, the decision-making process with regards to activism on social media. What is their emotional navigation of this? Because we have the social media platform, which has been designed by, the deaf let's say, people who are not deaf. Their experiences are not taken into account when these platforms are designed. So people then have to find their own navigational strategies in order to be visible on social media and where they're seen on social media. These things are not often very visible. So I think this is a very important aspect to bring to the foreground of this research. Next slide, please. So social media, is not something that just pertains to the content of social media. There's lots of other factors. So how people engage with it, how they emotionally engage with it, what they decide to share and engage with. And often this is not public information. It's something that's done, in the background, if you like. So a lot of that information you can't see on the platform, and it can be missed. So we have likes, comments, shares, and things on social media on the platform, but it's about looking at people's engagement with that, their emotional engagement, their decision making. So I wanted to look at more of the experiential side of things and the things that might be missed. Okay, next slide, please. So I wanted to show you my approach. And social media, it's not just what you see in terms of the likes or the discussions that may be visible on social media, but also the perception of social media. And social media can be perceived in different ways. So depending on emotions or experiences or community contexts, because, different communities, different cultures might perceive things different ways. They might re-express that content in different ways. And that's something that has to be bared in mind. So if you perceive that information from social media, it might be entirely different from a way that someone else perceives it or receives it. So there's so much data there on social media platforms. It's very data rich, but there's no real information about the context in which it's perceived or looked at. And it's quite limiting. So I think this picture is really perfect, that I've put on the slide, because if one person could post this and say, I've really enjoyed my holiday, it's a lovely destination, and another person might see that, think, oh no, you have to put sun cream on, there's risk of being sunburned, I wouldn't like to go there. So there's entirely different perceptions. Maybe somebody's afraid of swimming in the water. So it can be very dependent on the person, their emotions, their context, how they engage with the content. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about studying social media and use of ethnography really within social media. And I did consider that, and I thought maybe that's something I could do. But then I was thinking more about how people engage with social media and how that helps their understanding and how they see posts, reflect on posts. And then also the idea of knowledge being situated. So how we see something versus how other people see something, it's going to be entirely different. That's something that I wanted to bring to the picture as well. Next slide, please.
You're doing great.
So first of all, my first idea was to do a diary study for this. I was really, interested in this to see what people thought. I could pose questions to them and then they could respond to them via a diary format. But I did this as a pilot study in the first instance with the diary format. So I got 3 people in my pilot study to respond to these diary prompts. And I realized that people were aiming to just respond to the questions. They weren't engaging in very deep reflection. So they were more concerned about how they were responding to the task itself. And there had to be a little bit of back and forward with me. And I realized that I needed to change my methodology. And then I went down the workshop route. And I was aiming for a space where people could discuss these ideas in relation to social media, and also the platform design, the content, the posts. I wanted them to be able to reflect and discuss as a group. Okay, next slide, please. So you can see the pictures here on my slide. I filmed the workshops. There were different phases to it. So within the workshop, it wasn't only just about data collection, but it became a space for people to be able to have these discussions, to reflect, to exchange knowledge, and to create new things. So it wasn't just about me collecting data. So I wanted to show you what I did in the workshop. There were 3 phases. In the first phase, when people arrived at the workshop, I wanted to introduce them to the topic. So I had 3 physical stations, which were yes, no, maybe stations. And I gave people questions about social media. Do they use social media? What social media do they have? how do they like things, how do they engage with things, and people were able to move into the yes, no, or maybe zones. And it was an embodiment exercise that enabled them to sort of break the ice, if you like. So it was interesting to see that. And then secondly, you can see in the pictures here, I've got various social media posts that I printed out. Also, people sent me different posts that we could use about feminism and social media. So I printed out these posts and people physically engaged with them, picked them up, talked about them. And I also had emoji stickers, smiley faces, sad faces, things like that, and sticky notes where people could add on to these posts and express their feelings with regards to these posts. And also they could write their own comments as well to stick onto them. They could cut them out, they could edit them, they could do whatever they liked. It was very flexible. And the participants, were able to discuss the posts that they saw on the table. And then the third part was I asked them to create their own posts. So there were 4 workshops altogether. And then one group in one workshop, they had to create one post together. So they had to think about that, discuss that, and they had to see what was important to people and reflect on that. And where did they have limitations in social media, but that they couldn't use because of the design of the platform being limiting. So that was an interesting exercise. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to reflect on why workshops matter. Why are they important in the context of this research? And you can see that workshops, they're a space for people to come together and reflect. They can ask questions, they can reflect on their own experiences and that of others as well. And also people, develop conversations in this space. They say, oh, I want to do this, but I haven't done it, or I've avoided doing something. I'm not comfortable with a certain thing. So I'm trying to think if there's any examples that come out of my workshop. So, for example, deaf people often said that if they comment on something, then it meant that people will maybe be more critical towards them in the use of their English or the use of their written German, which may not be perfect. And that, that might become a critical thing and disengage from the actual content of the post. And then we talked about likes. So if you liked something, should you like it, or what does that mean to like a post? So, it was very important to consider those perspectives in the workshop. And I think those experiences are normally almost invisible. You don't see that within social media unless you have these sort of reflective spaces. So the workshop altogether was great. People really enjoyed engaging with it. It was very emotional as well. It had an impact on people. And then also, I said before already that workshops are not only about data collection, but it's also about exploring this term feminism, because people have different perceptions of that. Feminism on social media, some people weren't even clear about what it meant, what this concept really meant, whether it was just a case of women and men being equal and that was it, a tick box exercise. But really, it was a very complex concept, and it was able to help people with their understanding. It gave them the opportunity to explore the concept further. Okay. Just thinking if there's anything else. We can move on to the next slide, please. So through this process, I had some real realizations about social media research. It's very complex, it's not straightforward. It's not just about what's visible on the platforms, but it's about all the things that are hidden beneath the surface, the power dynamics, who's visible, who's not visible. There's so many layers to it. And then, at the same time, posts can be perceived differently by different people, depending on experience, emotions, community knowledge, context. All these different factors are very important. And it's important to keep these things in mind for social media research. And then also the platforms, you can see the likes, comments, the sharing, but you can't see the person's perception or interpretation of that, their emotional interpretation or their experience or the limitations. That's not something that you can see. So it's important to have that within the discussion of the topic and how this impacts people's perception of social media and the processes that they go through. And then thirdly, the workshops, they gave people the opportunity to develop their own understanding and what different concepts meant. So for example, feminism, that word, what does it really mean? That understanding was able to be developed through my workshops because there's certain issues that come up on social media as well. So on Facebook, for example, it's possible that somebody might share a video in sign language and then people add comments in sign language. But on Instagram, that's not something that you can do currently. So there are limitations between and within the different platforms about what's accessible and what's not. So I think, overall, my research has really helped me with this realization that it's not just about seeing what's visible on social media, because if you do that, you'll miss everything that's under the surface. And that's why I decided to go with this workshop format ultimately. And if you can move on to the next slide, please. Just got one last slide there. Okay, thank you very much. And there are references on a slide after this one, if anybody's interested in seeing the references as well on the final slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Very, very interesting. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's certainly a different method than what we come across most of the time. So in that sense, also was really interesting and informative for me. So we already have a question for you. I will first of all read that one. And we also have another question for Olga and Francesca. I will then go back to Olga and Francesca. And if there's any time remaining, I will also pose my own question to you, Vanessa, based on my notes. Okay, first of all, there's a question from Mini for Vanessa. There are actually two questions, as I'm seeing. First of all, did you ever consider to do workshops in an online setting? Very interesting. And the second question, how did you recruit the participants? And did they know each other before? And just to add, I was planning to ask you how many sessions overall you had with how many people? So some information about the workshops would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So thank you very much for the questions. They're very good questions. So firstly, just to address the first question about the online workshop. So, I did consider that but I really wanted this notion of embodiment and moving about in the physical space. I think it would have been a very different workshop if it were held online. And also, I think there's something in meeting, face to face, like seeing somebody in the room moving about, seeing the researcher in person. I think, that's something that's good. It means that you're not too distanced from the participants. You're in the space with them, and there's something to being embodied in that space and moving in that space, sharing knowledge and experience in the flesh, I think is valuable. I think I never really thought about doing an online workshop in an in-depth way, but I hope that's an okay answer to your question. And then secondly, in terms of how I recruited the participants, obviously I'm a deaf person myself, so I'm within the deaf community and I know people, so I was able to post on Instagram and ask people if they were interested, and then share, with WhatsApp and things like that, and then people were able to sign up. So I think I had 18 people altogether for my workshops. And then there was a couple of people who were ill and things, so it went down to 15 people who actually participated. And the participants did know each other. So some, knew each other well, some knew each other not so well. So I had 4 different workshops, and I knew that I wanted to vary the participants. So in one workshop, they were quite good friends, the participants, because, I thought if the people are here and they're having a discussion in the workshop, they can then, maybe carry on that discussion out with the context of my research if they know each other well. And that kind of impacted the ongoing factors. And then the second workshop, the people knew each other quite well, but not on the same level. So there was, different dynamics in the second workshop. So, out of the 4 workshops, people did know each other reasonably well. But the first 2 workshops in particular had a benefit for me because I knew the people. So I was able to engage, in the discussions with them quite heavily. And then, there were other workshops where I perhaps knew them, but maybe not as well. And then, I was sort of considering how that would have an impact. And then there were challenges, of course, that came along with that, because if I had people that I knew well and maybe knew their background and knew their family and things, then, you know, it could potentially impact the data, because maybe they said something and then I was already aware of that, but they didn't say it in its full context in the workshop. So then I have to think about what, you know, being careful about what I include in the data, what was actually mentioned in the workshop versus what happens to be my incidental knowledge, and making sure there's a distinction. So I hope that's clear. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, the question for Olga and Francesca, I'm reading it. While doing the ethnography, how did you account for the algorithm being personalized to the user, which can be limited in terms of exposure to the diversity of content in the platform?
Thanks for the question. So for the algorithms, we were aware of this in the beginning, but actually, if you enter these Facebook groups, there's a tool that allows you to toggle what is the order in which the posts are revealed. And so across separate Facebook accounts, so mine and Olga's, which do not have the same algorithm at all, and also we also check with and without VPN to check that it's not just because we're in Poland and using the Wi-Fi in Poland that it is showing a certain post. We toggle the post either by date. So there is a toggle that shows you every single post that was posted just in terms of the most recent one to the least recent one, and then, or to the oldest one rather. And then also in terms of relevance, this is the one that is usually toggled in terms of engagement, the ones that get the most posts, the most likes, the most reactions from the members of the group, or the most views in this sense. And then we also tried to add kind of some rigor in which we used some keywords to check if we missed any important posts that could be included in our analysis that were relevant to how these intermediaries or how these actors were creating the advertisements. And we checked for that too. And lastly, we made sure to eliminate individually and not using any machine or additional tools, such as AI, those that were not relevant to our research, as Olga mentioned. So for instance, posts inviting Filipinos to try their new product or to try out the new Filipino restaurant in town, we individually checked for those separately and on multiple occasions. Maybe Olga would like to.
Yes, I can turn on my video, but it doesn't matter. So the only thing I can add, and Vanessa also already referred to that, platform has limitations. So I remember, for example, when we at the beginning we tried to check, for example, what is the reaction of people also in the comments. Of course, we were aware that there are bots, that there are maybe other people paid by recruiters to comment as well. That yeah, this is very good offer, you should try. But the problem we encountered was, for example, that we saw that there is already 100 or 200 comments and we couldn't see any, or we could see only one. And we also realized that there is the strategy of the recruiters to hide some comments or all comments, maybe because they are stressed that people also will say negative things about the company or recruitment. So we realized that we can't really check it through Facebook. We can't check the reaction. We got this comment during other seminar that what is the reaction of people in terms of this attractiveness, but that was impossible for us to check because the nature of Facebook is actually like that. We can't really check it.
Thank you very much. And while we have Francesca and Olga on the spot, under the spotlights, I would like to ask one more question from myself that I have. So you mentioned how limiting your interest to public groups rather than private groups made it easier for you in terms of ethics. I'm sure it made it easier with respect to ethics application, a very practical dimension, but also, of course, with respect to broader ethical questions as well. I would like to learn a bit more about this dimension. So, did you actually check what is happening in the private groups? So, do you have an understanding of what you are missing, even if you didn't collect systematic data? What was your consideration from the practical viewpoint? Did you really consider, like, if you wanted to collect data from private groups in your institutions, what would you need to do? Could you just become part of them, and would you collect data, or would you need to go through a different ethics procedure? Would you need to talk to group owners and so on? Like, did you have these considerations? Did you think about them? So I would be grateful if, in that sense, you could provide us a bit more information about that trade-off between private versus public, and practicalities of going to searching private groups as well.
Happy to begin, and then maybe Olga would add. So for context, it was me who originally scouted the groups. That was primarily because some of the groups are also done in Filipino languages, and this is my mother tongue, so it was easier for me to scout for them. And also because familiarity with the Filipino community, so my Facebook recommendations would just show these as one of the advantages of the algorithm. And when I was looking at the private groups, what something both Olga and I noticed actually is that many of the posts in the public groups were just copy pasted or vice versa from the private groups. There was no major difference and dynamic apart from perhaps in the private groups, there were more posts that were in Filipino language, like that were not in English. And also, in addition to that, you asked about ethics protocol. So when me and Olga were starting this collaboration, I was just completing my master's in Sorbonne in France. And back during this level, I was like my master's was under a research lab under the CNRS, the French CNRS, so the ICM or Institut de Convergence Migration. And basically, this lab was not that strict, I would say, in terms of ethics, especially when it comes to digital research, since it is so novel. It was harder to, I would say, defend the use of the digital dimension rather than to justify the ethical protocols that we took once this methodology was approved. Whereas in Polish academia, which is where me and Olga belong now, I'm not sure for your institution, Olga, but it is a little stricter. We do have like an ethical committee, and there are several documents that need to be sent to the ethical committee in terms of ethical guidelines. And so I think in this sense, it might have been a little bit more difficult to get the ethical committee's opinion to do and go ahead with its research.
Thank you very much. So you broadly, it's good to hear that, like the results would be similar if you went to private groups as well, and wouldn't make much difference. Okay, thank you very much. So I have a question for Vanessa. In the meantime, again, our attendees, if you have some final questions, please feel free to leave in the Q&A session. So Vanessa, again, amazing presentation. I really enjoyed the discussion around the methods as well, like you telling us about the experience with the Dyer study and then why you decided to do the workshop. I think that is helpful for anyone who is considering to conduct this kind of a research. With the workshop, I understand why you ended up doing the workshop, and it's clearly very valuable in terms of what it has shown. But I think there are two different goals which may be in conflict to each other. My first impression was that you were primarily interested in understanding how people engage with the content, right? And then, but also my understanding from your presentation is that, and of course the logic of workshop dictates that, there's this reflective process in which people are also talking about their own experiences, which means that they learn from other people's experiences. So it is like a more thoughtful process. It is not exactly like how you would engage with social media content in your home, but rather just reflecting on that and maybe changing your views, the way you engage with it at the end of the day. So here is my question for you. first of all, in terms of learning how people really engage with social media, do you think the workshop has been useful? Like, have you come up with the workshop at the end of the workshop? Have you come up with the ways in which people are engaging with it? And if we are focusing on the other goal, the goal of creating that reflective process for other people, do you think that people learned from each other? And would you consider that at the end of the workshop created some change in the behavior of or the engagement of participants themselves? Sorry if this is a very long one.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much for your questions. So in terms of the participants, I think they do have engagement with social media and each other. And I could see that after, we'd done the workshops, I could see that there was a more strong, presence of posting and engaging with social media, because people were able to engage with each other. Or you also feel nervous, I feel nervous, and you also feel the same way. They were able to establish these shared experiences, and they didn't feel alone anymore because they had shared experiences with others. And I think that was quite powerful, realizing that other people felt the same and they had the similar or same experiences, and people realized from the discussions how they could support each other, how they could be more visible on social media, and they started those conversations about what they would do going forward. Really a collaboration exercise, and establishing mutual support through the workshop processes, and even liking each other's posts as well. So I think I was really happy to see that, because it means that the workshops were really instrumental in supporting and empowering people to become more visible on social media themselves. And then also before, I envisioned, in terms of the research, when I was thinking about how people would navigate social media, and I saw there was so much discussion about the emotional side of things in the workshops, and I realized that that's something I really wanted to hone in on a little bit more, was the emotional aspect.
Thank you very much. Super interesting. So we have actually come to the end of our time. So I would like to again thank all of our presenters today. We have listened to amazing sessions, to amazing research. I'm really looking forward to seeing them in print. I think, like as papers, I think they have very important, interesting insights to share. And if you turn them into papers, please share them with us so that we can circulate within the network as well. Is there anything else you would like to add, Anya?
No,
Yeah.
thank you very much for this, fascinating, session, and combining the two papers worked really well. Thanks so much for
very
contributing to our
innovative
series.
Just for note, for both presenters and our participants, we will upload video recording for this session on our YouTube channel. We will also share slides, participant slides, so those who you can have access later as well if you haven't been able to attend the entire event. And we will have another session next week about this time focusing more on quantitative side of things. We are very much looking forward to seeing you there as well. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
for the possibility and for the comments. Thank you so much.